Okay. Thank you very much, and thanks. Where is Jake? It's Jake. Thank you very much, Jake, for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. This is my third or fourth time, I think, at USC, and I always enjoy it very much, not the last. Actually, the last time that I was here, I was giving a talk on stewardship of assets in business, and how can we improve that in business. So it's almost kind of like the other side of the coin now. We're looking at governments. So let me start by kind of like, my talk is going to be about lessons from Greece and about change. So I happen to know a few things about change because that's what I do in terms of my day job. I try to bring positive change in business. So we'll see some learnings around that. And since the crisis started, and even before that, I have been, I would say, quite skeptical about the ability of Greece to change, just because all the principles of change that we know, they have been ignored. So here is the agenda that I'll have. I'll try to cover five things that are fundamental to actually changing organizations and bringing positive change. One is around truth. The other one is about culture. The third one is about leadership. And the fourth one is about concentrating on the things that really matter and not spreading yourself too thin. And the fifth one is going to be about accountability. So you will see that this presentation is going to be a little bit broader from what we heard before. And one of the fascinating things, for me at least, about what we were listening before is that we're almost like trying to convince people that accrual accounting is good. It literally takes me about half an hour in class to convince people that accrual accounting is good, because I talk to business people, and they want to manage a well-managed organization, right? They want to run a well-managed organization. So to me, convincing people so much about accrual accounting and the benefits of accrual accounting is not so much about the economics. I think everybody would agree on the economics. It's about politics, actually, and how do you get that message across in the political domain. So these are the 5 topics that I will concentrate on, and the first one is truth. And what is the truth about what has happened to Greece? And I will apply just business lens on that, and I will basically show you that pretty much the truth in Greece has been hidden for a very long time, but actually it can be really boiled down to 2 charts that I'm just going to show you. The first one is about whether Greece, before the crisis, was attractive or not to foreign investors, not just portfolio investments, but real investments. And the reality of this is that actually it was not. It was pretty much ranking at the bottom. People, for whatever reasons, I have pretty good reasons of why they didn't want to invest in Greece, but actually were not investing in Greece before the crisis. This is data between 2000 and 2007. Well, you can say that's okay, actually. There are countries that don't have big foreign direct investments, but actually they're doing pretty well. They're pretty competitive. The other channel through which you can be competitive is if your own companies are having big exports, right? So that could be the other channel. So it's okay that other people are not investing in my country, but actually I'm the Netherlands and I have a great company that is called DSM, and I have another great company that is called Philips, and I'm fine, potentially. So here's the second one. So this is the percentage of sales of home country companies outside their home country. And there is a common element across both charts. Greece is at the bottom on both. So when you see that data before the crisis, before 2008, what do you conclude? I'm in trouble. That's what you should conclude. This is before the crisis. So the truth is that actually Greece was a patient. It was a patient that needed surgery, not patches, actually. It was a country that was deeply not competitive and had a deep competitiveness problem. But actually, and that's how change starts. Change starts by identifying the truth, what is the real problem, and communicating that real problem, and communicating that to the citizens, to everybody, so you build consensus about what needs to be done. Well, actually, that's not really what happened in Greece. As we very well know, governments used to manage the numbers and used to report numbers that were not true. And that's something that many people disregard as well. So as a result, who would trust those numbers, one could ask. And what happened is that there was a complete lack of trust in government reporting numbers after that, and as a result, all the markets shut down. And this is what happens actually in many cases. This is what happens with companies as well. Just a well-known example right now that is happening is Valiant, right? They have lost, I believe the last time that I checked, they have lost almost more than 70% of their market capitalization. They can't close the books. They can't get an audited opinion. And investors are withdrawing their money. And the banks, right, are calling the loans. That's what happens in the business world. And I think the second non-truth here is that austerity was imposed by the creditors in some way, while the reality is that austerity was imposed by the markets to begin with. People were not willing to give you money to continue financing Greece. And that's the reality. And the creditors came and they provided, with certain programs and measures, a certain type of financing, which we can debate if it's good or not. But the underlying truth is that you cannot borrow money from the markets. And that's where you start. So it's actually very important. And one of the things that we know about how you can implement change in a country, in an organization, anywhere, is by identifying the truth and communicating that truth. That was, I think, never done in Greece. The second one, and I was very happy to hear Gerhard before talking about cultural change, because that's a big part of what needs to be done in Greece. Greece requires a cultural change. Culture is something extremely, extremely different. I grew up in Greece. I think what I witnessed, and what many people have witnessed, is a systematic attack over the years on the key value, what I consider a key cultural value of meritocracy. That the best person will get the job. This was not part of culture in Greece, and it's still not, unfortunately. It's a tragedy, really. And what you witness at the same time is institutionalization of nepotism and the legitimization of corruption. That actually it's okay to pay for a driver's license. It's okay to pay for a permit. That's part of the culture. I think that needs to change. The idea that the person that will be best for the job will get the job, the idea that actually we should provide financing to the best business idea, it needs to be part of the culture. That requires a deep cultural change, actually, within the structures of society. This is not something that has been happening, and I just want to show you a simple example of how culture influences very, very important outcomes in a society. A number of years ago, I published this Harvard Business Review article where basically I said, look, the fact that you observe no innovation and large bureaucratic structures in Greece, it's actually not random. It's a reflection of the culture of the country. And what you see in those charts, in a very simple way, I try to portray this for you, is that Greece ranks highest in an index of uncertainty avoidance. It's basically how averse to uncertainty are the citizens in a country, okay? And what you find is, and we're now finding consistently in research, is that culture influences systematically many phenomena in business and in society. So what happens is that when you're averse to uncertainty, and that has been for a very long time, so that data is not constructed after the financial crisis, it's before, what you find is that people won't take risks, won't start businesses, and as a result, innovations in products, processes, and business models are very, very low. And at the same time, what they need is they need a bureaucracy around them. Because what bureaucracies do is they decrease uncertainty. They create lots of rules, okay? So as a result, culture is something extremely, extremely important here. And we know that if you are trying to drive change, the type of culture that you create is going to be very important on driving that change. The third thing is about actually leadership. I have never seen, literally, never, zero, organizations that have changed successfully, and the guy at the top said, you know what, we have to do those measures, but I don't believe in them. Literally. It has never happened in the history. Okay? So if you think that you will go to BP, if you think that you will go to Walmart, if you think that you will go to any organization and there needs to be a restructuring, there needs to be a change, and the CEO comes out and says, you know what, we have to do those things, but I don't think it's a good idea, and you think it's going to be successful, you're daydreaming. Literally, you're daydreaming. Okay? And the narrative in Greece is that, you know, tough luck, the creditors are asking us to do those things, but just so you know, Jake, I'm a good guy. I don't believe in them. I'm with you. Okay? This doesn't work. I can tell you that. This doesn't work. So tone at the top is very important. I have written lots of Harvard Business School cases in different organizations. We're concentrating on that, and we're showing the importance of that. One of my favorites is actually the one on the right, which is the largest waste management company in Norway. It was acquired by a private equity group, a new CEO. The company has tremendous problem with corruption, tremendous problem. And yes, it was not in New Jersey, it was in Norway, okay? Tremendous problem, and the new CEO comes with tremendous conviction about what needs to change. Literally changes 50% of the workforce. Tremendous turnaround. But one of the key elements, he says, I believe in this. We're going to take a hit, but I believe in this, okay? Tremendous difference. The other thing that I want to touch on, and I think that's a big piece of why all these programs, all these memorandums have pretty much failed. I will be before that, actually. It is the inability to concentrate on a few things. So let me ask you a question, Paul. So when you try to change a company as a private equity investor, in your plan, do you have 1,000 different things that you're trying to change, or how many? A small handful. So usually what you're trying to do in a turnaround, in a change situation, you're having a plan that has basically 3 to 4 key pillars, and that's about it, right? You're saying, here's what we're going to change, accounts collectible, and we're just kind of like change compensation structures, and that's about it. Or maybe perhaps something different. But what has happened is a tremendous level of micromanagement that it just doesn't work. When you're trying to go to a country and micromanage, it just doesn't work. More than 1,000 sub-bullet points and sub-target items and this and that, and how much milk should be sold and bread should be sold and where and when, this doesn't work, okay? And you go through kind of like trying to really change every single institution in the country instead of concentrating on the key things that matter. And what do we know about competitiveness? So we know quite a bit about competitiveness. So what has happened, when you look at the data, really, when you have a data-driven approach, I'm a data guy, I believe in data, I think you should analyze the data. Well, one of the things that you find is that there have been large increases in taxes in the country. There have been large cuts in pensions. One positive thing is indeed the level of bureaucracy has declined, so you can actually form a business much faster, and the public sector has shrinked. But my point is that when you go back and you look at the data and what has driven competitiveness across countries, all these things barely matter. So what competitiveness depends on is actually on the quality of certain institutions. One of them is property rights, how well protected are property rights. If anything, this has declined in Greece. So it takes more time, for example, to enforce a decision in courts when you're trying to make an investment. No accountability mechanisms, and accountability is going to be the next one that I'm going to discuss. No accountability mechanisms have been introduced. Of course, as you very well know, cost of capital is extremely high. It's nobody that is sane, and no sane, and I serve on a bunch of board of directors, no sane director would sign off on such an investment. And of course, there is a huge brain drain, huge brain drain. Lots of fantastic people, fantastic Greeks with great skills. in engineering and in finance and medical equipment, in lots of sectors, have actually left the country, which benefits fantastically other countries, but it deeply hurts Greece. So all these things that you see on the right, which we know that they affect and drive competitiveness, they are the ones that actually have gone on the other way. Well, the last thing that I want to talk about is about accountability, and that links to the discussion that we're having before as well. Actually, we have a tremendous lack of information in order to judge governments, to make good decisions. It is really an area that represents almost a question mark. Why we haven't adopted best practices that we know that they work in public sector? Well, Jake might have more opinions on this than me. He has worked more on the public sector. But here is a very simple way to think about how do you manage an organization. And this is what I do in my day job. So when you're trying to manage an organization, there are really 4 steps. This is what great business leaders do that create most of the value in society, actually. Well, they start by measuring, okay? And you need to have a certain level of standards that guide your measurements. You need to adopt a true and fair view. I believe Paul will discuss more about this. And you need to actually measure stocks and flows. Okay? This is actually a big part of the problem that we're now having globally also with depleting resources, depleting lots of our natural capital ecosystems, and with climate change as well. We don't measure stocks, and we measure just flows. You need to measure both. So you need to have a balance sheet and a cash flow and income statement. And then what you do as a good manager, or what you should be doing as, I guess, a good politician, is you analyze that information. You take that information, you put it in a cost accounting structure, you put it in a budgeting variance analysis, you have financial statements, and you analyze this information. Once you analyze them, then you understand how to create value. That's what you do. This is common sense. I'm not just kind of like talking about something strange. This is just common sense. That's how you set targets. That's how you link incentives. That's what you do. And then once you have that, what do? You communicate that information, if you're a company, to your investors, to your employees, to your customers. Yes, if you're a government, to your citizens, and also your investors, right? The people that are going to provide your financing. So you're saying a value creation story. Why I'm making those things and how I'm going to create value. This is, again, common sense, and there are multiple constituents. You need to have a disclosure strategy. There are sell-side analysts, there are credit rating agencies, institutional investors. That's what you do. Well, in Greece, as we very well known, and Paul has done a lot of work trying to highlight this component, which is very important, is that we have no accrual accounting. As a result, we have no balance sheet. By the way, I don't know how many of you know this, but if you do have a balance sheet, you can derive from the balance sheet both a cash flow statement and an income statement. Literally. If you don't have a balance sheet and you have just income statement and cash flow statement, you cannot derive the balance sheet. It's like unbelievable. It's really the nerdy people in me. So anyway, so you need transparency. And once you have transparency, what happens is that then you can have accountability. Because you can have a government agency, then you can have performance reviews. This is, I know it sounds like a very novel idea. You don't rely on tenure. You rely on performance. It's unbelievable, I know. And once you don't have the measures, of course, you don't have performance-based incentives, right? That's what happens. Once you don't have that, then you have poor governance. It is, Ian didn't want to make cause and effect relation, kind of like arguments. I make them. We know that. We have very strong research evidence that this is how it works in organizations. Once you don't have transparency, then you don't have accountability, and then you don't have proper governance. Like, it's common sense. And I will just show you a simple example of how when you don't have the right measures, you can make wrong decisions. An example that you have seen is, of course, Greece's debt. Well, the usual number that is being reported, which is in the range of 180% of GDP, of Of course, my argument is that GDP in itself doesn't mean much, but that's a different discussion in and of itself. It's based on the face value of debt, which basically is the future value of debt. This doesn't mean much. Once you apply international accounting standards or financial accounting standards, right, from FASB or IASB, which, by the way, move all markets. This is what markets use. Most of the economic activity is happening within companies, right? And all of the companies will use that number, not that number. And that's how markets move. So you would have to convince me that Greece is pretty much the only organization that is reporting the right debt number, and all other organizations in the world report the wrong number, or we'll have to rethink about that number. And then what happens is that, and that's what I say when I teach financial statement analysis and business valuation to my students, is that debt doesn't mean much. Net debt is the important thing. So you need to take into account financial assets in that. And once you do that, of course, Greece's debt back in the end of 2013 was a much, much smaller number. And why is that difference? Of course, because the debt is based on concessionary loans. Very long maturities, rebates on the interest, below market interest rates, all these kind of things. So I wrote a case study, because that's what we use at Harvard Business School to teach people. So I wrote a case study about that. And one of the interesting things is that, of course, we frame it as a debate. Kind of like how much is the debt and what do you do as a decision maker. What is interesting about that is that when I teach this case, 0% of the students will say that the answer to the debt is 108%. Zero. So it's interesting. So, Paul, next to you. Thank you.